Question 3. Is the binomial a factor of the polynomial function? So here's the polynomial function. These are the 5 binomials. All right, so let's start with the top one. Is this a factor of our polynomial function? Yes or no? Well, one way to determine whether something is a factor is to divide. So if we take this polynomial and divide it by this polynomial, and we find that there are no remainders, if you do that, then you'll determine that this is a factor. Okay. Another way of determining whether a function is a factor, I mean, this only works with polynomial functions. This is actually an easier method. It's called it's a method called the factor theorem. The factor theorem. I'll write it down. Okay, with the factor theorem, we can determine the remainder of a polynomial function. A remainder when we divide one polynomial function divided by another polynomial function. And if the remainder is 0, that means that this polynomial is a function. So I did all of that to explain that if we take the opposite of this number here, instead of -1, we take the opposite, which is +1. Right? And we substitute 1 into the function, that will give us our remainder. If the remainder happens to be 0, then it is a function. Okay, so this is the method that I'm using. Again, there are 3 different methods. One is by graphing. We can graph on Desmos to determine whether or not a polynomial or binomial is a factor. We can also substitute, which is what we're doing here, the root of the function. All right, or we can do what we call the factor theorem. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So with the factor, we're going to use the factor theorem. So we're going to take our number 1 and plug it in, or substitute it into our function. Okay, our function is up here. We're substituting the opposite of -1, which is +1. So that's what we're going to substitute. Okay, let's go ahead and change all of the opposites here. So all of these opposites. So this is -3, so this will be +3. This is +3, so the opposite is -3. This is -5, so the opposite is +5. This is -5, or +5, so the opposite is -5. So we're going to substitute each one of these into our function and see if it equals to 0. All right, so let's start with the first one. Okay, again, we're substituting 1 into our original polynomial function. Okay, so 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, plus 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, minus 25 times 1 is 25, minus 75. Okay. So if we substitute all of this into, or if we just plug this in the calculator, or add all of this up, or combine all of these numbers, we end up with something that does not equal to 0. Okay, so therefore, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it does not equal 0. If it equals to 0, we check yes, but here it does not equal 0, so we're going to check no. All right, we'll do the rest. So I'll pause, and then we'll come back in a couple seconds. All right, and so as we can see here, we had substituted 3 in for x from the polynomial function. We substituted -3 here for x in our polynomial function. Then we substituted 5, and then we substituted -5. Again, we just took the opposite of each one of these numbers. Okay, so we did the first one. We got that it did not equal 0. Okay, 27 plus 27 minus 75 minus 75, whatever that happens to equal to, it does not equal to 0. Okay, so that one doesn't equal to 0, so we check no. And remember, according to the factor theorem or the remainder theorem, if the remainder equals 0, and we just found out that this remainder, if we substitute the number in for x, we get our remainder. But the remainder here is not 0, so therefore it is not a factor. Okay, with division, the remainder is not 0. Okay, so here we're going to substitute -3. We get -27, +27. +75, -75. All of that together equals 0. All right, so therefore our remainder is 0. Therefore this polynomial, this binomial, is a factor. Okay, let's talk about this one here. We substitute 5. We get 25 here, or 125 plus 75. Minus 125 minus 75, and as you can see there, that one is going to equal to 0 as well. So yes, x minus 5 is a factor. And then lastly, -125 plus 75, +125 minus 75, all that together does give me 0. And yes, that is a factor.